Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Developing an AHA Framework that is Fit for Purpose. As Megan just mentioned before, we are using Slido today. If you haven't used Slido before, you can access by scanning this QR code. There's also a link in the chat function here. Alternatively, you can join via slido.com and enter the code here on the screen as well. Now, please note the session will be recorded. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we start, and in the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community, including the Burrong, Burrong and Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose land I sit today. I pay my respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. I extend the opportunity for you to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which you are joining this meeting today. I'd also like to remind you again, this will be recorded, this session, and it will be published on the Academy platform Mighty Networks under the AHA CPD learning community. So a warm welcome to you all. My name's Joan Leo and I'm the Learning Product Manager for the Allied Health Academy. I'd also like to introduce you to Megan Kruger, who's our wonderful events coordinator, who's going to help us get everything ticking along, to Andy Richardson, who's our AHA CPD coordinator. And for those of you who are part of the AHA CPD collective, Andy's been doing a really amazing job to coordinate our CPD program and engage with you all through the Academy platform. If you have just joined us, as I said, we will be using Slido. There's information to chat you on how to link into the Slido, but we would love it if you could give a go at answering a few questions for us as we get started here. So we'd love to hear where you are joining us from today. Oh, welcome from Echuca. Fabulous. Wagga Wagga. Great. Albany. Fantastic. I'm tuning in from Melbourne, by the way. We'd love to know if you are an allied health assistant or an allied health professional. Wonderful. And where is your area of practice? Tell us where you practice. Wonderful. Nice spread there. Great. Wonderful. And finally, what you're hoping to get out of today's session? Well, perhaps it's one of those things where, oh, lovely. Yes. Okay. Better understanding the development of AHA. Information. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Fantastic. All right, and now to our guest presenter, Lara Fernandez. Lara is an occupational therapist employed with the Royal Rehab LifeWorks as an allied health educator. Lara has 30 years experience working in large metropolitan hospitals and rural settings as a clinician and as a manager. Lara's area of interest is neurological rehabilitation. Lara is also employed as a teacher delivering the Cert 4 AHA course for TAFE Digital. A very warm welcome, Lara, and thanks for joining us today, and I'm going to hand over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so developing an allied health assistant framework fit for purpose. Well, thank you to Joan. Joan's done an acknowledgement of country, and I'm sitting here in Sydney, and I'm on the land of the Wongal people of the Eora Nation. So I'd just like to acknowledge our traditional owners of country on behalf of Royal Rehab as well. So today's session objectives, why a framework fit for purpose was needed. I'll go through the approach that we went through and that we're still going through, and also the key learnings from the process that we've gone through and the journey that we've been on, and where we're looking to go to on this journey, because it definitely has not finished. Just a little bit of background around Royal Rehab. I can see that I don't think there was anyone from Sydney. Royal Rehab, it started in Sydney, and some people might know the big hospital in Ryde, where it's well known for its brain injury and spinal cord injury rehabilitation. But it's actually got a 125-year history. It's a proud charity delivering a diverse range of healthcare and now disability services as well. Our offerings encompass rehabilitation hospitals. We have a hospital in Ryde and one in Petersham, excelling in neurological rehab, allied health services, disability accommodation, in-home support, employment aid, support coordination and family mental health. We also operate a bespoke resort for people with spinal cord injury and training colleges as well, RTO. Central to our approach is providing tailored solutions to individuals, whether they're recovering from illness, injury, enhancing capacity, improving their well-being or fostering community participation. And our goal is to empower individuals to lead independent, fulfilling lives as valued members of society. So Royal Rehab has expanded its services over probably the past 3 years, I guess, where we've expanded in terms of the hospital, but also in terms of our community and what we provide. So we did acquire Breakthrough, another disability service. And from that, we've developed an allied health arm. So we've developed a new business arm, which is called Royal Rehab LifeWorks, and it's basically an allied health business. Our allied health business includes physiotherapists, occupational therapists, EPs, psychologists, counsellors, speech pathologists, positive behaviour support practitioners, and allied health assistants. We are basically now not just based in Sydney. We have places in Townsville, Cairns, Brisbane, Penrith, and Melbourne, and we also provide outreach services, so out to Dubbo, Coonabarabran, Ayr, a couple of other places. So definitely we have expanded. Our vision was that anyone, anywhere will have access to quality, timely, evidence-based allied health services. So, which sounds a great vision, but how on earth are we going to achieve this? It's well known there's a shortage of allied health professionals and growing wait lists. I know when I went out to Coonabarabran, there was a 3-year wait list to see an OT, and you hear those stories all the time. We had a new business, so we had change that was occurring, a growing business, and it was a fast-growing business. But it also meant we had to come up with a way of how we're going to meet demand. So we had a couple of allied health assistants, and we were growing them as important members of our allied health team. But with our future expansion, we also knew that they were going to be an integral part for our service to deliver quality services. So our lovely GM, Belinda, who's on here at the moment, came to me and said, look, I need you to develop a framework for our service. I know we've got a couple of allied health assistants. We don't really have anything in place. We weren't really sure of how things were working. As you can see, it's spread out across. And at that time, right at the beginning, we had a fairly small team and there hadn't been a lot of processes in place. I thought, yep, that's easy, no problem. You know, I know about allied health assistants. I teach the Cert 4. I've worked with allied health assistants, over my years, and there's already frameworks out there. This is going to be so easy to achieve, not a problem. Little did I know when I started diving into it. So, yes, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So with that in mind, I was very lucky. I already had my GM support from day one. So that sponsorship at that level was never an issue. In the back of my mind, I had done through the ACI, their AIM program for change implementation. I'd done redesign modelling courses in the past. I ended up completing the SARA project management course, which again gave me some structure and how to approach this. And I also did SARA's designing and implementing a successful allied health assistant model of care in rural settings course. So in doing those courses, whilst I was doing the project management, I was sort of pulling in bits and pieces, doing some research on what current practice was, and always having these regular conversations with Belinda, my general manager, just with ideas and going, this is bigger than what I thought. So the approach we came up with was basically, first of all, reviewing what's out there, what's best practice, what are all the available frameworks available. And as you start delving into it, you see that every state has something different. We also work across 3 different states in our business. So there was that challenge as well. I needed to identify what we actually had in place at the moment. So what was our present state? And then what do we want to get to? What's our desired state? Then developed the LifeWorks framework. Then we had to look at implementing it. We have evaluated it at the 3-month mark where we did a qualitative evaluation, made some changes, went through implementation of those changes. We then did a more quantitative evaluation and survey. So that was at the 6-month mark. Again, there was some more changes to make. Then we also did a review of the files at the 9-month mark. And again, more changes came up. So it's just a continual process. It's not a bang, here's a framework, there's your answer. It's definitely an ongoing process. So as you all know, there are quite a lot of different frameworks out there. Read through all of those. Attended, OT Australia did a hot topic on allied health assistants. I've looked at the Victorian, a lot of their information that they've got from Monash about allied health assistants and their models of care. So lots of good information out there, but how do we actually get this to work for us on the ground? So to determine the present state, what we did was I reached out to other Royal Rehab groups. So, like I said, we've got inpatient, a large allied health cohort at Ryde. We've got people in Petersham in a private hospital. We have other community services as well, just to see what they were doing. But they were all based in New South Wales. And everyone tended to go, oh, we just use the New South Wales health framework. And because our service was different, that just didn't quite fit what we needed. Definitely components did, but it wasn't exactly what we needed. I interviewed the AHAs that were on the ground at that point in time, and we had a couple of AHAs that were based rurally and in quite remote areas that were doing work via telehealth. There were some that were actually on site with some therapists as well. So again, slightly different way of working, even within that business. I had a review of documentation just to see, is there any evidence of clear delegation occurring? Also part of that allied health assistant model of care through SARA, they had an efficiency checklist, which I just used as a bit of a guide to see if we could answer some of those questions. So some of the questions on there were like, do you have clearly defined roles for AHAs and AHPs? Do allied health professionals have the skills to delegate consistently and being trained? Was there complete trust between allied health professionals and allied health assistants? So that's just a few of the questions that are on this little questionnaire of 19 questions. Of those, I could answer 3. So those are a bit of work to do to try and close that gap. So the findings from that, discussing things with allied health assistants, allied health professionals, looking through paperwork, looking at what was in place, I found there was no delegation tool or there was little evidence of even documented delegation. In terms of supervision, there was no formal supervision process in place. So basically the delegator was the supervisor, but we had, say 5 allied health professionals of different disciplines delegating to one AHA. And the AHA, there was no process in place. Like, who do they actually get supervision from? They weren't getting specific one-to-one clinical supervision. It was just seen as, the delegator, that's your supervision. So those needs weren't being met. There was no clear documentation process for feedback from the allied health assistant to the allied health professional. As we all know, that's such an important part of closing the loop and of our responsibilities. We did discover some allied health assistants were working out of scope. So again, because there's nothing in place, there was nothing to guide and direct. Allied health professionals were not aware of any of the training that an allied health assistant actually did. So had no concept of what an AHA was competent in doing. We had no competency framework, and there was quite a disconnect between even allied health professionals from each discipline. So we had, some disciplines going, no, the AHA works for us, and the other one, no, they work for us. So I think being spread out, there hadn't been that communication. So there was little teamwork really. The more you kind of started peeling back the layers, the more found that things are not working. So without that structure in place, some staff, there was quite a high turnover of staff, which understandable. So yeah, it wasn't a great feeling the more I found out. So we definitely had to do something. Some of those common themes, and I think when you start looking at, reading some of the evidence and the papers, and these common themes that come across in lots of things, but there was a lack of understanding of the roles. So definitely there were some allied health professionals thought that an allied health assistant was just a glorified admin. There was this perception of, I can't trust an allied health assistant. They're not trained to work with people clinically. So my blood was already starting to boil. People were scared to delegate. What if something goes wrong? Who's responsible? I don't know what they're out there doing. There was this real fear of allied health professionals being replaced by allied health assistants. So, if they come in and do my work, I'm not going to have a job. So there was a lot of misconceptions out there. We had a team also of allied health disciplines that traditionally, in my head, I'd always worked in hospitals or community health centres where your allied health team was more your OT, your speech pathologist, your physiotherapist, social work, dietitian. Whereas we had a team here where it was a lot more psychologists, behaviour support practitioners, counsellors, and then speech pathologists and OTs more than physical therapists. So again, there was allied health professionals who had never worked with an allied health assistant, or even heard of an allied health assistant. So a lot of education, but then misconceptions about what they were. Our allied health assistants were not sure who to go to. Who do I go to, if I want to learn something new? What if I want to develop my skills in a particular area? Because they didn't have that specific supervisor and there wasn't that supervision structure in place. Some allied health professionals had concerns about confidentiality and privacy. There was a bit of ownership of clients. We've always done it this way. Which is pretty common. Our allied health assistants, because there wasn't that structure in place, also flew a little bit under the radar in some places. So again, we needed to pull it all in. And with that, our allied health assistants didn't feel like they were a valued team member, which, was really sad. So as I talked about, we needed to work out what our present state was, and we needed to think about, where do we want to get to? What's our desired state? I think it's pretty clear. We needed our team to work together. So we needed a consistent approach for allied health professionals employed at Royal Rehab LifeWorks to follow. It would ensure everyone had a clear understanding of the roles, the responsibilities of an allied health assistant and an allied health professional. So ultimately, we wanted to be able to have confidence in working with each other as a team, and bring services to clients in a timely, efficient, safe and effective manner. So it sounds, again, pretty straightforward, but how did we get there? So we had a bit of work to do. It was definitely gaps, as you can see. So to bridge that gap, we knew that we needed a framework, which I know Belinda asked me to develop straight up, but I now had a better picture of what we had to have in that framework, what was going to work on the ground for our staff. So we identified the need for a structured framework that included, details about qualifications and the competencies that somebody who is trained as an allied health assistant comes with, the roles and responsibilities of an allied health assistant and an allied health practitioner in the setting, scope of practice specific to our service, specific to the allied health professionals that we had in our team. We needed a clear delegation and feedback process that was easy, that fitted within our work practices as well, and a supervision process. So quite a few things. As I said, we found, looking at all of those other frameworks that were out there, there's definitely components that we took and pulled in from those frameworks, but we discovered one size doesn't fit all. So we needed to develop a framework that would assist the business to provide a clear scope, and this would greatly improve the support that we provided to our allied health assistants, not only for better patient outcomes, but also to try and create a better workplace culture. We wanted people to come as an allied health assistant and want to work and stay and really have that job satisfaction with us. So we know that the use of allied health assistants is common in the health and inpatient settings and clinic-based facilities. And look, Sarah and the Victorian Allied Health Assistant Project have all recognised now that allied health assistants are definitely being used more in the disability area. And that's also from NDIS, where we've got funding codes now for allied health assistants. But we still just didn't feel like it was hitting the mark with what we needed. And I definitely understand, I think Andy mentioned it to me also, that at a national level, there is the framework to support delegation and supervision of allied health assistants in primary care, aged care and disability, which has been drafted, and AHANA have been consulting on that as well. So hopefully that will also pull in, that might be something else that we can also add into what we've been looking at here. But again, I think you still have to look at something that's going to fit and work for your business. So what our framework looked like is we actually had the education, skills and competencies. So actually, went through the units that normally somebody, AHA, who was trained as their Cert 3 or Cert 4 would be completing, so that our staff actually, and a lot of our staff went, I had no idea. I just thought you didn't even do training. So definitely that was an eye-opener. In our framework, we've got about scope of practice. And we really do, I guess, harp on about scope of practice quite a lot now. Again, just having that understanding from both, the roles and responsibilities from everyone's scope of practice. What's my scope of practice as an OT? So, the whole team, we looked at what each person's scope of practice was. We talked about allocated tasks, so those everyday routine tasks that our allied health assistants could do. So, that they definitely had everyone had an idea of what those tasks were. We developed a delegation guideline and template that could be utilised. We looked at supervision requirements and also how professional development could be built into our allied health assistants' daily work. So we had a bit with our delegation process that we went through, and very similar to what but I guess a lot of it again was just educating our staff in what a delegation process actually is, what it involves, the roles and responsibilities of each person. So we sort of structured it that, this is what the allied health professional would do. So they're doing their initial assessment, they're developing the therapy plan, they're identifying if there is a possibility for an allied health assistant to provide that support. They're determining if the tasks are within the scope of that particular allied health assistant. And again, we needed to do education around the fact that each allied health assistant comes with different knowledge and skills depending on where they've worked previously. We did have some students at the time that were also employed. So their knowledge and skills was very different to a trained allied health assistant. So that recognition we needed to provide some education around. Allied health professional would then discuss with the client about having the allied health assistant involved. Also about the billing, which is a side that I think with NDIS and in private has to be discussed and be consent provided for. And we had a fact sheet around that as well. And then we call it an IAP, which is our intervention action plan. And that's what the allied health professionals were doing that anyway as standard practice. But how can we build that into a delegation framework as well? So it wasn't something brand new because they were doing it already, but maybe we just add in a few more details if you are asking an AHA to follow on with that program. Again, needed to really provide education and support to the allied health assistant in when they get that delegation, that they can actually say, I don't feel comfortable in doing that, or I don't feel like I don't have those skills, or, how can I make sure that I feel confident and safe in providing this service. So we really found a warm handover, worked very well. So that was where both the clinician and the allied health professional and the allied health assistant would do a joint session together, and that warm handover occurred. So whether that was via telehealth or whether it was in person, that was sort of an essential component that we felt worked really well for the majority of people. Allied health assistant completes documents, and again we went through documentation and the best way to document, the way that we could provide feedback and ensure that the allied health professional was monitoring as well that how things were going, and then making sure that there was a pre-planned meeting to catch up in terms of progress and discharge. So that was our process that we put in place. We had, as I said, a delegation template, which meant that you had to have your timeframes in it, how to manage risks, what were accepted modifications to the program, what you could step up and what you could step down. So again, very similar to what other frameworks had, but quite new to this business. So in terms of, we've got this framework and we worked on it as a senior leadership team, and we made sure we had regular set meetings because, as we all know, trying to get people together, particularly remotely, can be pretty tricky. So we had regular meetings set aside and kept going through, updating and changing bits and pieces. Because it was really important for me, who hadn't worked a lot in that NDIS area, to have the people that were working on the ground giving their feedback. So once we were happy with that, we presented the framework via 5 presentations. So at various times of the day, try and capture as many people as we could. We have a lot of part-time staff. We have staff that are doing lots of home visits and things. So we wanted to capture as many staff as we could. And this was really supported by Belinda, our general manager, as well. So she, again, really promoted it through Teams chats to our national team, the team leaders encouraging everyone to attend. We recorded to make sure people attended as well. So that was one way of making sure we got everyone there. We also recorded the presentation so that new staff could actually watch the presentation as well. And I offered so each site, we've got, as I said, Townsville, Cairns, Melbourne, Penrith, they each have their own team meetings on a weekly basis. So again, just offered to come along and, questions and answers, or, I'm here if you need to answer any questions. So at the 3-month mark, we did a bit of a get together to get some feedback on how it was all going. Was it actually being used? Was it just sitting, in SharePoint and no one even looked at it? What was going on? So we had 2 different sets of questions, one for allied health professionals, one for allied health assistants. We just looked at, have you read the framework document? Have you seen the fact sheet that you can be utilised when you're giving it to clients? Have you been documenting consent that you've got consent for the allied health assistant to take over the program? Are you receiving feedback? Have you got scheduled regular catch-ups? And then from an allied health assistant perspective, were they getting adequate information? Did they feel they were getting delegated appropriate tasks within their scope? Were they having a warm handover? Those sorts of things. What sort of feedback? Did they feel it was easy to provide that feedback? So we just wanted that qualitative sort of data to review if it was working. So a few things came up that we needed to change and improve. Supervision still was not streamlined. So despite us saying, we need to have it across disciplines, we were in the midst of developing a supervision framework as well for all staff. It still was pretty ad hoc. So then allocated one-to-one supervisors to each AHA. We also had a peer supervision roster that we rotated around the different clinical leads for each discipline. So we're getting across sort of exposure to all disciplines. The SOAP note was being used, and a copy of that was being emailed to the delegating allied health professional. We had a bit of a clunky clinical system in place at that time. Some of the feedback was that our allied health assistants didn't feel that confident in writing SOAP notes. So we did develop a documentation package and a competency around that as well. So we did education around documentation, and then also, looked at it from a competency perspective. So I think that has really helped. We noted our client information fact sheet was not being utilised. It was very wordy. So our speech pathologist has had a review of that in terms of it being easy to read. Our recorded presentation of our allied health framework was not being watched by all staff. So we put in place, we have an induction checklist now for when new staff come on board. One of the things on that checklist that must be completed and signed off is that they meet with myself in that first week, and also that they watch the presentation and we can discuss any questions that they may have. We also had no clear process for simple tasks like resource development, and so, didn't need to do a full big delegation template, but what about some of those things? So we developed a centralised job bank, so an Excel spreadsheet on SharePoint, and even some of those sites like Melbourne who didn't have an allied health assistant, they could still be asking the allied health assistants to assist with doing some of those, looking up for some quotes for some equipment, or so we had a centralised job bank that we developed. Our allied health assistants were being used as admin still, so we just reiterated that education. Some things, yes, there is that admin component, but definitely not, that was their role, and found that we really needed to provide really concrete examples for each discipline of what an allied health assistant could assist with. So, for example, with our behaviour support practitioners, we've had our allied health assistants assisting with some storyboards that they create. So there's been some different things that we've been able to put in place. And one last thing that we found was understanding of that allied health assistant role in the business when recruiting. So because we had an expanding team and it was expanding quite quickly, we had some new managers coming in who didn't have a clear understanding of what an allied health assistant's role was in our business. So, it's not the same as that hospital structure. It's quite different and varied, and our caseload is very varied in who we're seeing. So we needed to make sure that that was being explained when we were doing the recruiting. At the 8th month mark, we did a survey monkey, so more of a quantitative type evaluation. So looking at, understand the differences in the roles. So we had 85% say yes. I've watched the presentation. Still not everyone, right? I'm clear on the billing practices. Now that was really low. And so I think that was another barrier. In terms of delegating, 75% of people felt confident in terms of understanding deciding the best way to utilise allied health assistants. 75% said they did. And would they like further education? So we're still 55% said yes. So to me, we're still not clear. Even though I feel like we're doing all this work, we're still, you still need to keep going. So out of that, we ended up developing a billing guideline, which has now become a bit like the Bible for most people. It's always there with them, but it has some allied health assistance scenarios added into it as well, so that, how do we bill somebody if it is a warm handover? Or how do we bill when we're doing bits and pieces, or there's two of us there, how does it all work? So we've got that structure in place, so that's not a barrier for people to not delegate or not to utilise our allied health assistants. The other thing we did, which in the NDIS world, is you need service agreements. So we simplified that service agreement process also for when using an allied health assistant. So again, just decreasing the barriers for an allied health professional to use and work with an allied health assistant. At the 12-month mark, we did a file audit. And that file audit found, so we had a look is the SOAP notes being utilised? And out of 20 files, 19 were, so it was great. Is the delegation template being used? Not so well. So only up to, I think only had 3. But was there evidence of delegation documentation? Well, yeah, there was 13. So a lot of people were finding they were emailing the delegation rather than filling out the form. We had a change in our clinical record system as well. So during the period, so that had an impact as well. I also ran a survey so that we could do like a panel discussion. So this was a couple of months later. So when we did the surveys, so give me some questions that you want to know. If we have a panel discussion with an allied health assistants on there, allied health professionals, give me some questions. So again, it came back to what's the level of confidentiality and privacy when supporting psychologists with clientele? In what situation would be billable or non-billable when an allied health assistant is seeing a client? So we're still getting those billable things. What's the best template to use? So again, how do we train allied health assistants in competency? So I guess, after doing that survey, we did a Q&A where we had a allied health assistant, had a psychologist on the panel and myself, and had some really good discussion as well. So I feel like each time we evaluate, we get more in-depth questions that are coming out. So it's like we're drilling down further and further into the framework as we go. So from that post-survey and file audit, like I said, we did a billing guideline. We ended up doing a new delegation template. So that first one, as I saw, wasn't being utilised on a regular basis. So with our new clinical record system, we're doing a pre-populated information delegation form. So it's simple for everyone to utilise. And again, doing education, so ongoing education. So we do our lunch and learns. We have lunch and learns twice a month. We attend multidisciplinary team meetings, and again, I'll often pop into those, and it's interesting just even being able to say, have you thought about, that's something that would be great to delegate to an allied health assistant. So it's just having someone in there to provide that little bit extra. So current state, where we are at the moment. So we have bridged that gap. We've bridged that gap in quite a big way, but we are still definitely getting it right. We're getting closer, but I think you really need that continuous reminding, that continuous education. So you really need someone to be driving this all the time. It's not a put something in place, that end of story. It's really important to have the billing guidelines that are in place now. We do have a delegation tool, like I said, that utilisation is definitely improving, but it also is dependent also on the experience of the manager at the site too. So really making sure at that level you're getting everyone on board as well. It was important to use change management skills because you had to bring everyone along on the journey, and I still have to bring everyone along on that journey. So ensuring that I'm getting feedback all the time. I'm really open to feedback. And, as new staff come on board, new people come on board with different experiences as well. So we can always be improving that process. When I redid the questionnaire, so that was the efficiency tool through SARA, we are now scoring 15 out of 19. So we've had a huge improvement. Definitely, I've probably been like the squeaky wheel, but we definitely are getting there. And that whole workplace culture has definitely changed and improved as well. The key learnings. So you need to have all leaders on board, and the new leaders need to be informed early, and you need to get them really aware of the role of the allied health assistants, because black holes are formed when commitment or compliance is not sustained at each management level. And I did see that, if one particular site had someone, a different person come in and they didn't have that same awareness. So being aware of that, you really have to understand your service and how it works. Like I said at the beginning, I thought easy fix, but absolutely not. Don't assume people know. Even experienced allied health professionals often have not worked with allied health assistants. Or have not worked with allied health assistants in this context. So don't assume just because they might have been a therapist for so many years that they have a clear understanding. I've already said about that, making sure you really do go through using some sort of project management model is really important. Be prepared. Introduce the framework at induction, but then make sure you're following up. So like I said, it's just that continual education is really important. We also have on our Allied Health National meetings, we have the Allied Health Assistants as an agenda item, just their reporting, so that they, if there's anything that they would like to raise or, anything that has come up, there is that opportunity. We have a Teams chat for Allied Health Assistants. So due to distance, none of them are actually together, but we have a Teams chat to try and encourage that workplace culture and that support. We have regular lunch and learns. We also, I guess we're just trying to also think outside the square a little bit. We want innovation in our therapies, and we're always looking at new ways of providing therapies, and that's something Royal Rehab is really passionate about. We're looking at different types of really advanced technology and robotics and things like that, but we also need to be looking at being innovative in our models of care and how we can provide services and get the best service to our clients, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all about. We needed to recognise allied health students come with different skills and knowledge to qualified allied health assistants, and it's also making sure all staff recognise that as well. You need someone to drive it, have clear explanations of your billing processes. The warm handover, like I said earlier, is essential. You need to keep monitoring things, processes change, different approaches, all of those sorts of things. So you continually do need to be updating and keeping on top of it. And I guess it is that squeaky wheel, and you're just repeating, revising, keep talking, just keep talking. So, and just, I guess, making sure that people are aware of how important and integral allied health assistants are to the team. That's me. Any questions?
Lara, thank you so much for sharing today around the AHA framework. And I just want to acknowledge, the complexities you would have navigated around that interview time, but also then just also acknowledging all those change principles you used at that implementation phase as well. There are a few questions actually that have come through, some through Slido, and I'll pop them there into the chat. The first one relates to the Commonwealth Chief Allied Health Officer development of that National AHA Scoping and Delegation Framework, whether that might alter a framework you've developed in any way.
Attention, I haven't seen it. So I know Andy mentioned it and I've seen it on Ahana's website, but I have not seen it all. But definitely I think I guess I'm lucky in that I have two hats. I sit on, for TAFE Digital, the Certificate for Allied Health Assistants course, and have very passionate teachers that I work with who, we're all can see that a national approach is so important. And in my other world as an OT and educator, again, I can see that there's so many gaps. We need it would be great to have a more national approach, but I don't know, sometimes it's those little finite things that you need to make sure are not being missed. And you think that framework is just the be all and end all and will answer all your questions. It's the application on the ground that I think is so important. Yeah.
Thanks, Lara. There's also another question around how you would suggest asking your employer to develop their own framework. Currently, it isn't clear what the AHA role and scope of practice is, and a colleague here today is in their workplace. Any comment around that, Lara?
Yeah, that's really hard, isn't it? So, and I guess that also comes into where supervision is so important, that you could be talking this through with your clinical supervisor. So again, and I think that's what we found right at the beginning. All of that was missing. So if an allied health assistant did have concerned that they weren't sure about their role or who to go to and their scope of practice. They didn't know. So tricky. If you have a supervisor, I'd be discussing it with them, or a manager. There is so much information out there, and happy to share, what we've done. As I said, it's not an easy fix. That's something that you do need to, I think, really work hard at to ensure, that workplace culture, everyone has that, that understanding, but also to, there's such essential roles. That's tricky. It's hard to know, how to bring that up. But I guess as an allied health assistant, you will still have that responsibility to know your scope and be well aware of that, and that if you feel you're being asked to do something out of scope, you need to speak up. Yeah.
Emily's asked, are you able to talk about the insurance issues for AHAs? There was a question, is this a webinar in June? But any general comment around that, Lara? Insurance?
I actually don't know a lot about insurance because our AHAs are covered in our business. As an independent AHA, I'm not quite sure how that works. They have seen, I think maybe Andy can even speak to that more than what I can. And I think there was a webinar coming up on that soon, wasn't there? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You posted some details.
Watch
Thank you,
space.
Megan.
Watch this space.
Yeah. And look, there's acknowledgement here about, your amazing presentation today, Lara, and the 3-month qualitative data being really interesting, some changes being implemented as a result. You had any more general comments around the evaluation or how you...
Yeah, I think that was quite an eye-opener because, again, I was a bit naive and thinking I've solved the problems, but people are busy. So, again, it's easy to fall back into this is how we've always done it. So it is making sure you're getting that support right through to come on that journey with you. And I think probably from that 3-month mark, when I realised, hey, it's not just here's your framework, see you later. I was able to work with the senior leadership team, and we've continued to kind of go on that journey together and make sure it's fed down and it's constantly on the agenda. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, are there any other questions from our audience today? I think that's covered most. Lara, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing the framework. And it's wonderful that, we have this as a recording, and our AHA, CPD community can access this recording and everything you've shared today as well. So thank you so much. I was just going to pop a little bit of information. Thank you. Just pop a little info up here. So if you would like a CPD certificate for attending today's webinar, you can complete the brief form. Thank you, Megan. You popped it into chat before. There's a link in the chat function, and that just takes a moment to complete, and we can ensure that you have a CPD certificate for today's fantastic webinar. I'll give you a moment if you want to scan and complete that. Now, we also love feedback as well. So if you have any feedback for today's webinar, again, there'll be a link in the chat to complete a really short survey, but thank you in advance for that. It won't take long to complete at all. Right. Now, we hope that you've enjoyed today's session. As you know, you now do need to be a member of the AHA CPD learning community and our online learning platform to actually access these monthly CPD webinars. So it's $99 per annum. You get access to all up and coming AHA webinars and recordings. And there's a huge catalogue of case studies, communication tools, and a lot of great content and networking opportunities. If you're an AHANA member, you can automatically have access to the monthly webinars free of charge. So yeah, really encourage everyone to share relevant information about the community, and we always love promoting up and coming events as well. Now, our webinar for June is Dr. Nathan DeCuna, who's the Assistant Professor at the University of Canberra and ACT Health Research and Innovation Fellow, and he will be presenting on the post-diagnostic support for people living with dementia and their carers. So in this webinar, there'll be a description of current gaps in dementia services offered in the ACT region. There'll be a presentation of results of hospital-based trials of 12-weekly multi-component rehab program for people with dementia and their care partners, and also a discussion on the ongoing development of co-design, short-targeted at-home allied health dementia programs. So stay tuned for that. Now, there are also a lot of upcoming events within the AHA CPD learning programs. So here's just a few more difficult conversations when have we got that in July, then enhancing allied health for older people in residential care, and a fantastic presentation scheduled for September around understanding the social model of disability and how this fosters inclusion and accessibility. Just another quick mention as well too, that as an AHA CPD learning community member, there's no need for you to register for these events now anymore through Humanitix. So you just need to jump onto the platform in the Academy, go to the events tab across the top, top and select the event you want to attend. You can just add that to your calendar, or you can get access to the webinar link directly in this events tab as well. So just clicking on their web link and you can join the webinar. It's as easy as that. Thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you really enjoyed the session. We look forward to seeing you again at the next webinar. Have a wonderful month.